In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. We are podcasting and bringing you all the cool stuff.
Yes, all the cool things. I mean, we're pretty much on the hunt for all the cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's our watery mission statement. We're bringing the cool.
Looking for cool.
But believe it or not, we're doing a pretty good job, if I don't say so myself.
Starting with ourselves.
Starting with us.
Oh, geez. Yeah, you know, it's really fun. We get to talk to so many interesting people, and today is no exception. We are excited to have an awesome guest today. But before we get to that, we just want to say we are back from Peru. Even though we're not really back from Peru, we're actually recording this ahead of time, and we haven't even left yet. But when you hear this, we're back in. Yeah, we are back from Peru, and I'm sure it was awesome. I'm sure if you check out our Instagram, you can see how awesome it was. I'm not sure exactly what to reference you to quite yet, but I'm sure there's some amazing photos on there.
Yeah.
But anyhow, and if you're enjoying the podcast, remember to go on over and leave us a 5-star review.
Yeah.
We are committed to, you know, requesting, reminding of whatever R word you want to, harassing, which is not an R word.
Well, there's R's in there.
Harassing. You know, but just making a commitment to actually get those 5-star reviews, because we do know it makes a difference in the kind of guests that we can get and the access to interesting conversations, and we're committed to bringing those to you.
Yeah, and it's fundamentally how we gauge our self-worth.
Yeah, basically.
So choose wisely.
Choose your stars wisely.
But the reality is, though, that now iTunes has made it pretty easy. So if you follow us in iTunes and you're on any sort of device in the podcast button and you go into the actual episode, you can just scroll to the bottom of the episode and it's right there.
Yeah.
Like, ta-da.
It's easy.
Yeah, it's about time, iTunes. Yeah.
I know. They did used to make it very confusing.
Yeah, super, yeah. But anyway, we're past that. Thank you, iTunes.
Yes.
Don't downregulate us.
No, don't mess it up. So we have a great guest on today, Angela Mavridis, which is easier to say than you think. And she's from TRIBALI Food. She's actually the owner, creator, CEO, head chef. Yeah. She is all of the parts of TRIBALI Foods, and, you know, just a really special lady. We actually tried recording this podcast a few weeks ago and couldn't get our internet connection. And because she's here in LA, we said, hey, why don't you come by the studio and actually record with us? And she was lovely enough to do so. And we're so glad, because she's just an absolute doll and just a very kind and authentic human being.
Right. Yeah. And she's super passionate about what it is that she's doing. And that really comes across in person, and I think it probably will translate, you know, via the audio as well.
Yes.
And she's on a super good mission here, man. She's and she is a lady making things happen.
Yeah.
Like, it's no joke.
Absolutely. And her mission is actually simple in theory, but quite complex in execution. And that is creating real simple foods in the form of burger patties.
Right.
And so we were talking about this in the podcast, but I'm sure you all have seen the veggie patties and the black bean burgers and all the things that, you know, or even just regular burgers that are out there in preformed patties. But her mission is actually the highest sourcing, the highest quality, grass-fed, grass-finished, really getting the product that she would want her family to eat, and that she, like she says in the podcast, that her 8-year-old could turn over the package and understand what each of the ingredients are, which is a huge piece of this, because even if you have the best sourced foods, if there's a bunch of fillers and there's a bunch of stabilizing ingredients and all kinds of things, then, you know, it loses some of the quality, the efficacy of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it'd be like going out and buying grass-fed finished beef and then just like covering it in MSG before you cook it. You know, you're like, we wouldn't do that. Like, what's the point, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So she's obviously super passionate, and she's a woman on the mission to elevate the burger. And, you know, as we talked about a few weeks ago with Diana Rogers, you know, elevating that conscious carnivore message and really making sure that, you know, we're doing our part in this community to stand by the ethics and, the belief systems that we really, I think, innately all have, and making it more accessible to all of us.
Yeah, for sure. And she's, her products are available in the Pacific Southwest regions of stores, right? So they're out there in Super Targets. They're out in Whole Foods, Erewhon, if you have one of those. Bristol Farms, kind of all of these, well, at least in the LA basin, those are all super sort of everywhere.
Right.
But she's also on Amazon.
Yeah. And on Amazon, online, her own website.
So you can just order the stuff and then just have it shipped to you wherever's.
And she'll also be at B-Fest.
Bam.
So Angela is going to graciously donate one of the meals for our luncheons. So she's going to donate some of the patties, and they're delicious. Honestly, they're amazing, and we're gonna, we're really excited to have our bees try them because we got them and we're kind of like, whatever. I tried one and I was like, wow, these are actually really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
Really good. And then we had 3 different kinds, and each box I was like, I don't know which one's my favorite. These are amazing. Yeah.
Well, it's that kind of thing that you taste it, you're like, oh, pre-made burger patties that are already seasoned. I don't know, and then you taste it and you're like, wow, this is a really good flavor. And then I didn't even look at the labeling or whatever until I've tasted it. And then I flipped back over. I'm like, wait a second, this is like too good.
It's too good to be true.
What I mean?
Yeah.
Because that happens a lot. You're like, oh, wow, this tastes like amazing. And then you look at the back, you're like, oh, this is actually completely legit. This is, what's there, like 6 things in here?
Yeah.
And they're all like things, like meat.
Yeah.
Salt,
like spices. Black pepper, basil, like whatever. Yeah. No, it's really cool. And I mean, I think you guys will just hear her passion and commitment to the community, to the, just driving this food story to a higher level. Yeah. It's really great. And we go on some awesome tangents.
Yeah,
and
she's a great sport. She
got caught in the middle
into the Vanessa and Adam
vortex,
but she's a great sport, very well spoken, and a solid ambassador, frankly, for this entire thing.
Yes.
Sustainable food, paleo, eating, the whole 9.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Whole30, turns out. We talked a
all
little bit about that.
Awesome. So you guys enjoy, and without further ado, here's Angela.
All right, we're rolling. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making the trek all the way to Venice.
It's beautiful out here. I'm happy to do so.
Well, yeah, we think in LA, it's like, oh, you live in LA, come on by. It's not a big deal. But like, you live in another country in LA, basically.
I know.
Yeah. So we're really excited to have you and talk about the new product that you've launched. But before we do, maybe you can just give us a little bit about your backstory and, what got you interested in food, where you kind of discovered the importance of the quality and, sort of the sourcing and all that good stuff. Just get us up to speed on like who you are now and how you got here.
Right. So I've always been interested in nutrition, even from a young age. But I always think of, had I known then what I know now, how different my journey would have been. But luckily, I grew up in a Greek household where healthy eating, the Mediterranean diet, was just the way we ate. Ironically, though, my dad owned and operated fast food hamburger restaurants in Pasadena that are quite successful, but it's fast food. And that's, even though we cooked healthy at home, we did have cheeseburgers, fries, and a shake more often than not.
Yeah.
So, but I was always on a quest of the best nutrition for my body. So at the age of 13, I decided to become a vegetarian. And if you know anything about a Greek household, being a vegetarian was almost like being a part of a cult.
Yeah, I actually do know this because I became a vegetarian around the same age but I'm part of an Italian family. And I remember my grandparents would be like, oh, you're a vegetarian? Okay, well, it's just chicken. Like they did not understand. They're like, oh, it's not meat, it's just chicken. I'm like, well.
I totally understand.
Yeah.
And it was like so strange to them. Like, why would I do this to the family?
Yes.
Like it was almost I was betraying everyone. But for me, it was more of a quest of what's the healthiest way to eat. And I think back then, it was all about, the 100-calorie snack pack and low-fat this and removing saturated fats and vilifying meat because of what we knew then. So I did eat fish, though, because you can't be Greek and go to Greece in the summer.
Exactly. It's not meat.
Not fish, right.
It's fish.
So, and I did that for a long time. And in that, that period, I was also an athlete. So I was at times a marathon runner, a CrossFitter, a weightlifter, a cyclist. I did a couple centuries. And I was always fueling my fitness through protein supplementation. So, you know, you can only get so much protein from your vegetables. And I probably wasn't even doing vegetarian right. You know?
Yeah.
I was probably deficient in a lot of things because I didn't know what I know now. But it was always protein powders or protein supplements or protein bars, protein shakes, you know, always to make sure, am I getting the right amount of protein? And that worked for a while until it just didn't work anymore. And it did a number on my digestive system. I had all sorts of issues. And I kind of say that, you know, the hard drive crashed. And I wasn't feeling good anymore. So about 4 years ago, after studying nutrition and diving a little deeper into the science of how well-sourced animal proteins can have a really great benefit to your body and your mood and your health, I decided to try my first grass-fed and finished beef about 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back since. It was like the aha moment. I felt better. I felt more satiated. I wasn't always that hungry feeling. And knowing that for me, the important things was that the animal was ethically treated and ethically raised and humanely raised in an environment that's right for the animal, and it was fed the diet it was meant to eat. So once you have that and you know the source and you can trust, and I mean, I even went up to the farms now that I'm producing a product and made sure to see that the animal was grass-fed and grass-finished. And these are important to me in not only eating it myself and feeding it to my family, but now producing it and giving it to the world. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's how I came about.
Well, that's a solid story. So I'm curious though, how many years were you actually vegetarian?
35.
Wow, a long time.
I mean,
Yeah.
then that's a long time. Well, but to be fair, like eating some fish and doing some stuff like that can really sort of help if you're, you know. And this is the thing. There's plenty of people who are vegetarian who pay a lot of attention to it and do it really, really well. They can do it their whole lives. And my opinion is probably still suboptimal, you know, but if you do vegetarianism, like even marginally, but then still eat some fish here and there, it's huge. You know?
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
oh, ta-da, well, here's the fatty acids that you needed and all of this kind of stuff.
Or
Right.
even eggs. Did you do eggs and cheese and that
I
kind
didn't
of thing?
then.
Okay, yeah. So you were
Yeah.
off that. So I'm curious because I feel like, especially with any diet, but particularly with vegetarianism, was there a point where you thought, well, this isn't really working, but instead of thinking, oh, it's not the vegetarianism, it was like, I'm gonna vegetarian harder, like where you kind of double down.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I went vegan for a while. I even tried a raw like microbiotic diet
Right.
for about a week. But you go down that rabbit hole and you're
Right.
like, for that quest of the healthiest way to live and fuel your fitness, what can I do? And harder wasn't right.
Right.
I mean, you know, for me, it was more, let me look at the science. Let me look at the deficiencies that I did have, and you know, iron and B12 were my biggest deficiencies, and where can I source those from? And
Right.
you know, it just so happens that animal protein
Seems to
and
be the
animal
spot.
meats,
Yeah.
Well, see, so that it actually says a lot about you and your methodology for this stuff, that you actually had some work done and were like, oh, or some blood tests and some things done. And you're like, oh, there's actually deficiencies here that I'm, you know, and this isn't normal. You know, I probably need to do something about that.
Right. And that came about from just listening and be intuitive to the way I felt. Like it came to a point where I wasn't feeling right. I didn't
Right.
feel healthy. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm, you know, two-timing people by telling them I'm a vegetarian, but sneaking behind and saying, I want to eat some meat. Like, I've got to come too. If I'm going to eat meat, how am I going to do it? What kind of meat am I going to eat? Where is it sourced from? And,
Right.
and you know, how am I going to do this? So
Yeah.
Well, it really speaks to how we get how we identify ourselves in our social groups and all of those things. A lot of times are how we eat. You know, I'm a vegetarian, or I'm a vegan, or I'm paleo. Like we really do start to identify with a group in terms of how we nourish ourselves. So I think as we've been hearing this theme over and over in the podcast, and I think it's just one more time to remind the listeners, like, if things aren't working and like you are committed to your group over your health, you gotta zoom out.
yeah, and you should be so dogmatic, I think, about it. You should
Yeah.
really listen to your body and listen to what's changed over time. I mean, how many times have we heard coconut oil's good, coconut oil's bad?
Right.
Egg yolks are bad. Eat the yolks.
Yeah.
Saturated fat and meat is vilified. Saturated fat is good. I mean, people are confused as to how to
Absolutely.
eat, and I feel like, you know, when we go back to ancestral eating and just eating real, simple foods, I don't think you
Right.
can go wrong.
Yeah.
Now, whether you want to play with your macros and do more of a ketogenic diet or a lower fat, high carb for whatever your goal or your athletic endeavors are or your body composition goals
Right.
are, that you can play with and, you know,
Yeah.
turn the levers. But at the end of the day, real simple food, I mean, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
eliminating, no one's going to tell you eat more processed food and sugar.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's eliminating that, the high carbohydrates from the processed sugars, and everybody feels better on that kind of diet. So
Yeah, 100%.
Amen.
So with the sourcing piece of this, because this is something that, I mean, to me, it always seemed sort of self-evident that the sort of factory farming methodologies were just totally skewed. But I think now, in retrospect, it felt that way to me because I grew up in super rural California where almost everybody that I knew raised cows. And like, that's what you did. You raised a cow and you killed a steer every year, and like, you did it, you know, and then you put them in the freezer and like, you know, so that whole process of living animal to dinner plate was very clear to me, you know, and it wasn't until kind of going out into the world, you know, and recognizing, you're like, so wait a second. So these guys at McDonald's are going through how many thousands of pounds of this in a week? Where are all of these cows coming from? You know, because that process, it took 3 of us a whole day to do 1 cow, you know? So like, where's the efficiency in this process? And so I'm curious, like when you were making that transition from vegetarianism or back into eating meat, and you're like, okay, I'm going to get the best source, grass-fed, grass-finished piece of beef. How did you always know that was sort of the best way to raise these animals, or did you have to like start doing research into meat and be like, okay, this is the problem that I see and here's how I want to solve it? Does that make sense?
No,
Yeah,
it does
okay.
make sense. And I think it was a combination of both. I mean, the main issues around meat are threefold, the way I look at them. One is environmental and how it impacts the environment. One is a moral issue on either, you know, whether your religious practice or your morality doesn't allow you to eat meat, or the moral issue around how the animal was raised and treated. And another is the health benefits of the actual meat. Like, is it healthy for you? Is it not? So when I decided to eat meat again, I looked at all those things. And I definitely did some research into how the CAFO system works. And if you're
Right.
familiar with that, it's a confined animal feeding operations.
Right.
And it's just so fascinating. There's so many aspects that most of the public doesn't really know about. But
Right.
I mean, cows weren't meant to eat corn, genetically modified corn and soy. I mean, they have
Right.
3 chambers in their stomach, and they're meant to ferment the grasses into proteins in their gastrointestinal system. And when you feed them corn and soy, it causes all sorts of issues in their intestines. And they actually give them about a 1/4 pound of antibiotics daily as a prophylactic
Right.
to prevent the foaming of the mouth, the ketoacidosis, all the issues that come with eating this kind of diet for the cows. And then not only that, they're all in a feedlot where it's just breeds diseases.
Right.
And in order to not have their whole herd be taken out by a disease, they administer these, antibiotics to prevent
Right.
these sort of things happening. And also the rapid growth hormones, because, what they want to do is get them as fat as possible to slaughter, as
Right.
quick as possible. So all those issues just obviously turned me off to eating CAFO meat. And I mean, the way I look at it, I think we should all boycott CAFO meat.
Right.
I mean,
I
we should,
agree.
right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
should. I mean, it's for environmental reasons too. I mean, all the
Yeah.
damage it does.
Right.
And there's this whole new movement. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like the regenerative agriculture, land
for
to
sure.
market,
Yeah.
where we're using the animals to actually regenerate the soil
Right.
and do so much good
Yeah.
for the environment. So when you look at those practices, and then you look at how an animal is raised on a field, on a pasture, and it eats its grass, from start to finish. And again, there's a differentiation between when you see on a label just grass-fed
Right.
or grass-fed and finished. And for those who don't know, just grass-fed isn't any better than feedlot beef.
Right.
I mean, all animals start their life on grass. So
Right.
was it finished on grass? That's the
Yeah.
most important component. So, there's little things that people do in the industry to just
Yeah.
kind of work around those
yeah.
loopholes. And so you have to be, as a consumer, I think you have to be hyper vigilant on knowing the source, reading the label, and vetting the farms.
Right.
And, I did that. I went up to the
Yeah.
farms and I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that,
Well, and it's even more important now, right, to not just read the label, but to have a full understanding of what all the little things mean. Because we see the same thing with chicken, with eggs, right? Cage-free organic, vegetarian fed, open range. There's all these little nuances to the words that dramatically change what it means, what was actually happening with this animal. And I'm sure you know this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there was maybe a year or two ago, the USDA changed the labeling requirements around grass-fed beef, right? So there's fundamentally no check, right? You can say this is grass-fed beef and there's no real
Yeah.
check or balance to it, right?
Unfortunately, that's the
Yeah.
case. So it's up to us as new brand manufacturers of a product to communicate that
Right.
through, podcasts like this and through my branding and my mission and my message that this is 100% grass-fed and finished, and here's the practices and the standards of the farmers that we're sourcing our meats from,
Yeah.
and here's how the animal was raised, here's how it was treated, here's how it was slaughtered, and here's the environment it lived in. And I think, there's, as a consumer, there's, different levels of what you want to eat, but at the basic level, it should be antibiotic and hormone free.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's like 101.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Eating meat
Yeah.
101.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just thinking as you were talking about the CAFO raised meat and, thinking about the listener out there that's like, yeah, that's nice, boycotting these, CAFO establishments, but when you're raising a family or maybe you don't have a lot of money or, you're doing the best you can with what you have, you don't often have the luxury of thinking about those practices when you're trying to feed your own family and just like get everyone with clothes on their back and out the
Right.
door and all that
Right.
good stuff. So I'm wondering what can, like you just mentioned that at least being antibiotic free and hormone free. So maybe we could just talk about what are some of the things people can do? Look for those in particular, or if they're actually going to the expense of buying the grass-fed beef, what are some things they can look at to know that's what it really is?
Right. So, and there's different cuts of beef too, right? I mean, now that I'm a meat eater, I've studied it out backwards and forwards. But what you want to do, I mean, if you are feeding a family, and I am, to be honest with you, I've got 3 little ones, and I do the best I can too. And there's times when we're eating out, and you
Right.
just have to order off the menu, guys. But
Right.
when we're at home and I have a little bit more control, over what I'm feeding my kids and my family, I'm going to look for the cuts of meat that are a little bit less expensive, and that's where grass-fed and finished ground beef comes in.
Right.
So the ground beef is less expensive, and then I'm also buying in bulk. So I'm doing those 2 things to ensure that I can, stock that freezer and have that product,
Right.
for me.
Yeah.
A grass-fed and finished tenderloin is a
Yeah.
lot more expensive than, and filet mignon than your ground beef.
Right.
And secondly, looking for that 100%, grass-fed and finished is another key component. If you're thinking that you're buying grass-fed because the label just says grass-fed, just know that it's actually not.
Yeah.
So
Right.
don't even bother paying more for it.
Right.
And it also depends on, where you're sourcing your meats from. So looking for those, I mean, I've also looked at the back label and looked up the farms and
Right.
kind of getting online and doing a little bit of research.
Yeah.
I mean, it never hurts. And there's online subscription too. We know
Right.
of a few companies that you can, subscribe and you get a box sent to you and with a
Yeah.
variety of cuts. But buying cheaper cuts will also, and buying in bulk will also save you money in the long
Yeah.
run.
Yeah, and I love that you say look online, because when you go to a grocery store, it's the same brands there week on week. So it's not like they switch it every week. You could look at that brand, and if it says grass fed, you could go home and say, oh, what's the name of that company that's selling the beef and research it. And then at least you would know maybe it's not finished, but maybe it's still antibiotic and hormone free. So you're like, okay, well, maybe those are worth it or whatever. But it's like, I think we forget that you can actually go back and find out. You could even call the company and be like, hey, what's up? Is this stuff legit or not? And they have to tell you what's going on. I mean, well, actually, I don't know that they do, but they if you ask them straight up if it's finished, grass-fed and finished, I'm sure they have to tell you whether or not.
You would hope.
I would hope so. I don't know.
But I'll tell you what, just even at the farmers markets, people bring their beef and we have we hear tales of farmers markets where this happens, where they'll go out and they know the people that are there, like, I know that guy because I'm his competitive farmer or whatever, and I know for sure that he buys from all over the place. Those are all not raised here. When he runs low on meat, he buys from all of these other farmers around here. And so how can you possibly be sure that we're really dealing with grass-fed, grass-finished beef here? And they're just, oh yeah, no, of course it is. Yeah, so at the end of the day, there's a market tricky, and people are selling things, and this is where it becomes, I think, overwhelming for some folks, is that you really want to do it right. And then you hear us talk on this podcast about how it's really hard to do it right. And then they're like, well, okay, I'm just not even going to worry about that. I'm going to dial in some other piece of what I'm doing here. But I think the solution to that for a lot of folks is to find some brands that you 100% do trust, right? And this has been kind of the story around paleo in general, right? There's all these different ideas out there in the nutrition space about, you should do this and you should do that. There's the warrior diet. There's the not warrior diet. There's the, all of this stuff. And yet people find the Mark Sissons, they find the Rob Wolfs, and maybe us, maybe we might fall into this category now. And they're like, okay, I trust what these people have to say about this thing, and I think it's really the same way around food sources too. Like, I mean, we're spoiled because we have a friend who I grew up with that raises our beef. I'm like, Mike, what's the deal? He's like, yeah, it's over here. It's in grandma's pasture all, its entire life. I'm like, perfect. And it's the same every single time.
Send us photos.
Send me a picture. Yeah, it's like have you ever seen
Portlandia?
Yes. Portlandia. The one with the chicken. And what was the chicken's name? Okay, the chicken was raised on this farm. So that's like if you were talking about the 101 level of just reading the label, and then there's like the Portlandia level, and we're fortunate enough to be in the Portlandia level on some of this stuff just because of, who we are and where we came from. But there's companies out there like yours who are doing this work for you. And this is why I think it's so important that you be able to give voice to this, to explain all of these things, is that once you've developed that trust, then you can be pretty certain that this is what's up. And then hopefully, you don't get bought by General Mills and everything. Or maybe you do. I don't know. I don't know what your dreams are. But.
I don't know. General Mills is buying enough food companies now that I'm like, maybe it's going to actually like change the structure. That's my hope. I'm like,
well, that's a more I'm
forever
Well, it's
an
interesting.
optimist.
They're looking at little brands like us because they don't have the R&D to do what we're doing. And we're taking a big risk. I mean, for me personally, it's a huge risk of what I'm doing. But believe me, it's coming from an authentic, trustworthy place where initially I did it for me. I made these, I put them in my freezer. Yeah. And then friends and family were coming by and saying, can I have that Moroccan lamb patty you made? Or what about that Southwest salmon and the Greek pork and the bison one? I mean, I'd take all these different, I think I might have mentioned to you last time we spoke that I bought a refurbished grinder off of Amazon and a white lab coat. My kids thought I was a mad scientist. They're like, what are you doing? You were a vegetarian for 35 years and now you're like grinding all these meats. But I mix just herbs, vegetables, spices, and purees. That's it. That's the only thing you're going to find in there. No binders, no fillers, no additives, no preservatives, nothing. It's just what I would make in my own kitchen and stuff you would find in my pantry. And like I always joke, like my 8-year-old needs to be able to turn my label around and identify and know what every and each ingredient is. And if he can't understand it, then it's not going on the back.
That's
label.
amazing.
And so I would make these, different patties that were so flavorful, and that's what sets us apart. It's not just the nutrient density, but it's the incredible flavors that come with it. And right now, the ones that have hit the market are the Mediterranean beef, the umami beef, and the chipotle chicken,
which are all delicious.
Yeah, there's something for everyone. I joke I have like 3 kids, and I think each one likes, each a different one. And they have it as a snack when they come home from school with a little sliced avocado on top of the chipotle chicken. That's their snack.
That's awesome.
How proud am I that they're not reaching for some junk food, and that's what they ask for.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Great, healthy fats and a good source of protein.
Yeah. Well, just feeding their brains, feeding their bones, they're giving them the good building blocks for growth. It's just amazing. You sent us some of the samples to try before the show. And I think I was telling you this last time, every time we opened a box, I'd be like, oh, this is delicious. This is going to be my favorite one. And then the next box I would open, I'm like, oh, maybe this is my favorite one. I don't know. They're all my favorite.
This is such good food.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like picking your favorite child. I don't know. I love all 3 of them. They're all great. But they are. There's, for me too, I did them very convenient, right? So they're individually wrapped so that you don't have to pull out the whole thing. You don't even need to defrost them. They cook straight from frozen. So you just open it and you stick it on frozen and you cook it 5 minutes per side on any cooking method you want. I kind of made it idiot proof, so to speak.
I love it.
As easy as possible, and the affordable cut of meat so that it's as affordable. Because I truly believe that trustworthy, affordable meat should be made available to everyone.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we can't eat this way,
Yeah, it's a very, very solid mission. And it seems simple. People are like, oh, well, that should be reasonably easy to do. But it's really not, it's like, it's going to take some serious effort. And I think that's, in California, it's one thing, probably on the edges of this country in general. But if you're in, smack in the middle of Oklahoma or somewhere out there, in one of the like actual food deserts where there's just like avocado. No, we don't get avocado.
Yeah.
That doesn't show up here.
Yeah.
It can be really hard. These things can be really, really challenging. So the approach that you're taking of being able to make these things like packageable, because it's a very commercial feeling product. Like when we got the boxes, I'm like, oh wow, this would go in every freezer section, as opposed to, I don't know what. They
weren't wrapped in patchouli linens.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't, you're like, oh, wow, that's very natural.
Ooh, they're hemp bags.
That's probably not work.
They're just like, remember when you were a vegetarian and you'd buy the veggie burgers?
Oh, I lived off of those.
Yeah, they look similar.
And they had so many flavors, like the Southwest and the habanero, and they were made with quinoa and black beans and mushrooms. The funny thing is, Vanessa, when I was eating that way, I never once looked over that label to see the maltodextrin, the potato starch, the isolates, the additives. I never bothered.
Yeah, because they look really healthy on the front.
Right? And I was a vegetarian, and I was doing what I thought was the best thing for my body,
Of course, yeah.
So now I'm just, vigilant about
what goes on.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because the sourcing thing, I think, is like, I could just keep talking about that stuff, because I think the work that Joel Salatin, I can never get that one right, and Alan Savory, obviously, right? So all of these guys, and of course Rob's got himself into that world as well, and I think that this is probably the most important sort of follow on to people getting their nutrition right, right? So it's like, oh well, and you were alluding to this earlier. Not only can we eat in a way that's healthy for us, but look, it's sequestering carbon and it's fixing problems that we've been causing by eating in an unhealthy way. So it's sort of like this magic fix for a lot of this stuff. And it's, the soil science and the migrating herbivores and all of that stuff makes a lot of sense to me. The one piece that I have some difficulty sort of wrapping my head around is the poultry part. And how do we do good chicken on a large scale, and so I'm curious how have you found a good place to get chicken?
Chicken is another animal entirely. It's a different beast. So it's a little bit more difficult. The highest quality you can get is pasture raised. The problem is that it has a different taste and a different texture. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but I don't think the public's ready for it.
Right.
I've tried it. And it's different. I actually even fed it to my kids and they didn't eat it. They're like, this is weird. What is it?
Interesting.
Like, it's just pasture raised chicken. I enjoy it because I know it's of the highest quality.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then also at the scale that we're moving at, there aren't enough producers out there
Right.
to get ground chicken pasture raised to move quantity. So that's the highest. Then secondly, what you want to look at is that the chickens that are used are at least fed non-GMO, sorn and koi.
Koi.
Yes.
Well, koi,
and
for
soy.
sure,
Yeah, corn. Yeah, sorn and koi.
Yeah, sorn and koi. So just as long as it's non-GMO. I mean,
Right.
that's important to me. So those are the things and that it's organic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you do the best that you can do with
Right.
the budget that you have in the
Yeah, and it's an interesting piece of that because the now I'm going to say it. I'm just going to go with non-GMO.
Yeah.
Non-GMO, whatever they're eating.
Yeah.
Whatever the grains are. But that's not necessarily their natural diet, right? So when you're looking at a package that says vegetarian fed, it's not necessarily like a boon in their cap, right? So the things that you really want to be looking for are what you were just saying, that it's non-GMO and organic, right? So, and I think in the United States still, organic does in fact mean non-GMO, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one thing you can kind of hang your hat on there. And it's interesting what you say about the chickens tasting different because I'm trying to think. I mean, we get pastured eggs, obviously, and they look dramatically better, right? They've got the
yellow, the yolks are
orange
so
yolks,
yellow.
right?
What a difference, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, this totally makes a lot of sense. And the chickens, generally speaking, are smaller. So we usually get a whole chicken and, crock pot or whatever, and we do that whole kind of thing. But I've never really noticed the texture difference. And it makes me wonder if, in fact, we're getting pastured chickens. Because it's the same thing with beef. Grass-fed beef, like I grew up eating it and wild game. So that kind of gamey, lean flavor just seems like home to me. But for some people, they're like, blah, what is going on here? There's no marbling. What the hell? This is a
Right.
terrible
They're
steak.
unfamiliar with it. And that's kind of why I
yeah.
put the spices and seasoning and vegetables in it, just to
Yeah.
give it that little flavor profile, because then you're still getting the benefits and the health benefits of having the grass-fed beef, which,
Right.
has all the CLAs and
Yeah.
the nice ratio of omega-3 to omega-6s
Right.
and the antioxidants. But I added a little bit of that flavoring so that if someone does feel like, oh, well, this is different
Yeah.
than what I'm used to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just slowly wean them off. You should. This might be a product idea. You could have a spice tapering program where like you start them off on the super spicy and then wean them off and they like slowly get used to that flavor.
But the flavors are like what makes them so
It makes
amazing.
it unique.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I
unique.
did them like that because, in our world, we're eating the bunless burger, right?
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
a burger. I grew up on the burgers, but
Sure,
I'm just
yeah.
not, my kids eat them in between a bun. I let them
Yeah.
go to town with their big burgers with lettuce, tomato, pickles, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing. But I wanted to present them, and even on my box, eating them a little more ancestral-like.
Right,
So with
right.
cauliflower rice or zucchini noodles or grilled vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was a nutritionist for a while too, coaching people one-on-one. And the biggest obstacle I would get is a lack of preparation or planning.
Right.
And, some
Totally.
people would say, I don't have time and I don't know how to cook. I'm
Yeah.
like, so what's your biggest obstacle? And the protein source seemed to be the one that was most intimidating to them. They're like, I could roast some vegetables or chop a salad.
throw
but
some, right.
what do I do with protein? Am I going to have to put a whole chicken in the oven or
Right.
pot roast in the morning so it's ready in the evening? And that's why, these sort of answer that complicated question of what do I do
Oh
with
yeah,
protein?
yeah. And they're like the perfect size for me for a protein serving too. It's like I can have 2 of those and I'm good to go.
Two. I figured you were having two. I'm like, don't tell me you're having just one 4-ounce fatty.
No. Yeah, it's just right. And because you're right. I mean, even for us, we do a lot of coaching with this kind of stuff too. And even in our personal lives, the food preparation piece is 100% the most difficult. And it's sort of the first chink in your armor when you're low energy and you just want some food. The last thing you want to do is have to go through all of the somewhat arduous steps of preparing a good meal.
Right.
So having something convenient that's awesome is really a good idea.
Yeah. So I know you talked about Rob being on the board and, that you've obviously got some great backers in terms of just people being excited about the message and where you're taking this company and honestly what it represents. It represents a shift in consciousness around this particular subject. And I think that this is where the vegetarian movement, I think, has highlighted this for a long time that, the food that we are eating, the beef sources, like these, it's not, these aren't great sources. They're not, it's poor, the animals are treated poorly, easy for me to say. And, that I think we've we've kind of come on the tail end of that, like, okay, yeah, you're right, but we still want to be, like we said last time, conscious carnivores. And I think that that's really what's exciting about this, is that there are companies like yours really taking a stand for what's right, for, you know, trying to make a difference. And we were just talking before we went live about General Mills and a lot of these other companies buying up smaller companies. And you were talking about the fact that they don't have the resources to do the research and development. So they really do look to these smaller companies to build out these concepts. So maybe you can just talk about, like, what does it take to build out these concepts? Like, what does that process look like for you? And how long from the time you thought of it to the time you actually went to, you know, market? What is that process like?
Okay, we're on a detailed business plan.
That's a good question. And it's so funny because I truly believe, like, if this was easy, I think everybody would be doing
Sure.
it.
Right.
I mean, I feel like I'm, you know, David against Goliath here. Like, I'm this little brand with a message because I'm a mom and this is the way I want to eat and fuel my family. And here I am producing a product up against the world that's doing the
Right.
bleeding burgers,
Right.
right? The
Right.
bleeding fake burgers that have, you know, a product in them that hasn't been approved by the FDA yet is
Right.
regarded as safe for consumption. So,
Right.
you know, and they've got millions of dollars funding their biotechnology of the fake burger. So it is very challenging, but I think at the end of the day, it's about the authentic message. And, you know, Diana Rogers, if you're familiar with her and the Sustainable
Yeah,
Dish.
we just had her on the podcast,
Oh,
actually.
yeah. And I'm
yeah.
supporting her new initiative in the movie she's coming out, Kale versus Cow. And I love that she's all, you know, her message is it's not about the cow, it's the how.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so part of your question on how building this business, when I did have this idea, and it was like an idea in my mind, I approached my local Whole Foods. And they knew me, actually, because of my dad's fast food hamburger business that was down the street. And they all ate there, and they love Tops in Pasadena, and it's the best thing, you know, burgers, fries, and milkshakes.
Yeah.
And so they knew we're the burger family. So they're like, okay, these people know something about a burger. They've been doing it for over 40 years. And I did. You know, I grew up in that restaurant business. So I took my concept to them, and I brought them a product, which they cooked out in the back of their meat department, and they said, you've got something here. We're going to set you up with corporate. So when I went to corporate, I didn't have anything other than an idea and a product I cooked in my kitchen. But I told my story, and I told them my mission and how I want to clean up the burger patty, and they saw a need for it. They're like, you're onto something, and we think there's a need for it, and we think people are becoming more conscious on the transparency, the clean labels, the sourcing, and again, what their eats, right?
Right.
It's not about what you're eating, it's what your eats. So there's a wave, and I'm not trying to ride on the latest trend, but I think that people are waking up. And so Whole Foods was really instrumental in helping me produce this product. And it took me over a year to get USDA approvals, co-packers, sourcing, vetting the farmers, all the ingredients, the R&D that went into it. It was a fun process. And then I came back to them and I'm like, okay, I have a brand. I built a mission. I have a vision, and I have a name, TRIBALI, join the tribe.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and that's another whole thing of the brand is, you know, like we were saying, you subscribe to a certain way of eating and you call yourself a vegetarian or a paleo or whatever. But every time you change something in your life, you do need a teacher, a teaching, and a tribe, a sense of community of people that are like-minded and that do things the way you do and you know, see life the way you do. And so that tribe just resonated with me. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we are. We're a tribe of people that want to clean the plate up, change the way you eat, one bite at a time. So that's kind of how it came
That's
about.
amazing. I love it. I actually got the chills.
Yeah, no, that's really,
No,
good.
I did, because you could feel the passion. Like, you can feel the sense. And there's, you know, I think there is a difference for people who go into something just, like you said, riding the coattails of the newest trends or the money. Like, you can just sense it, you know, like you just smell it somehow. But like, I can just feel sitting across the table from you how authentic that drive is for you. And like, it's just really powerful. And it makes me excited because we're trying to do all this stuff as coaches on one side of the table, which is like, okay, you've got to eat better, you've got to nourish yourself, you've got to do all those things. And then our clients go out into the world and they're not supported. They're like, I don't have access to any of this. Like Adam said, I live in Oklahoma, or I'm not in California, I'm not in Venice Beach. I don't get vegetables delivered to my doorstep. And so it's like, this is creating an opportunity for the larger scale world to have access to good food, which, like you said, we should all have access to.
We should.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. And it all goes in conjunction. It's like, as we believe in the ancestral way and the primal way, it's like you can be doing your diet 100%, but if you're not also getting some movement and some sunlight and some good sleep and some community, I mean, it's not, all those have to work together to make for a healthy lifestyle. And we all want to live our life disease free. I think that's our goal. I mean, maybe when we were younger, it was like, I've got goals of finishing the marathon under, this time. But now, I mean, it's all about just living disease free and healthy, a long and healthy life. And all that, comes into play with your movement and your,
your health is your wealth, right? And this is the thing. I just was thinking just now, as you were saying, you have to get good sleep and exercise and all this thing. I was thinking, how many of your burger manufacturers out there are going to sit and talk about how important sleep is? Or this is what's exciting to me about this movement in particular is that people have a very well-rounded understanding of what real wellness and health is. This is no longer like everything's partitioned out into sections and this person is all about just exercise and this person's just about sleep. I mean, we're talking to you about your burger patties and you're reminding our audience about the importance of sleep and exercise.
Well, it all goes hand in hand.
It does, yeah. And it's just so exciting that this is our movement. This is our tribe. This is the conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about, and funny you say that. When I did go pitch this to my co-packers, and that was another part of the business, it's like finding the right co-packer that's willing to stop his production line to take a little, risk on this brand that you think is going to change the world, right? And they're producing thousands of beef a day for Costco and Targets, and they're like, okay, you want us to stop and try this? But when I went and presented to him, I've got something here. The whole table of people were doing a Whole30. So, which is great because my product is Whole30 approved, and there's a way, and again, the Paleo, it's Paleo certified, Whole30 approved, organic, non-GMO project verified, and I did it all because that's an eating protocol, and that's a nice elimination diet to get you started on your health journey. And the fact that they were all doing it, they knew what I was talking about. We were cut from the same cloth. They're like, we get what you're trying to do.
That's
so
amazing.
we're so excited to partner with you, and we're going to give you, a chance to do a couple trials here and see how it turns out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is incredible. That's like going into a place, like traveling to a foreign country and like happening to stay at the one hotel that speaks English. I know. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, thank God.
I know. We
This is
spoke
gonna be
the
so
same
much easier.
language.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, and it's pretty interesting because this kind of thing, and it's probably the same way in like every industry or sort of niche or whatever, but it starts to seem like it's kind of an echo chamber sometimes, where we're like, oh, okay, well, there's all of these people doing this. We're all doing basically the same thing. And it starts to feel like, you preach to the choir a lot, and that also maybe the market's saturated, you know what I mean? Or you're like, oh man, okay, maybe this isn't that novel of an idea that I have, And then you start to realize, though, that when you go out into the great wide open and you come across people, and how rare it is to come across a group of people who are all doing the Whole30. And maybe you were like, oh yeah, the Whole30 that's great, but I'm kind of a little more in alignment with this aspect of whatever. It's too restrictive for me or whatever. But when you look at the Whole30 in the context of everything else, you're like, my people.
Yes.
Like here they are. I found this exact situation.
That's my tribe.
And so it's always that thing where the differences between you are always smaller than you think when you start to look at the whole greater thing. And we've even, we talk about this quite a bit with the vegan crowd, because there's a lot of vegans over here on this side. I don't know how
I've done
Pasadena
demos
is,
over
but-
here at Irwan, and I can't even tell you how many.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I used to be one of you, but just give this a try. You'll like it.
Right. Yeah. And there's a tremendous amount of these folks running around. And like one of the things that we always really try to do is be more inclusive than exclusive on that, and identify the things that we have in common, because there's so many.
Oh yeah.
There's really like fundamentally 3 arguments that we're like, okay, these we don't agree on, but everything else is on point.
We
So why
both
don't
like festivals.
yeah, exactly. But how come we can't just all say that we should have way better access to vegetables? Because we talk about the access to good quality meat being an issue, but access to decent vegetables is another huge issue. Like, why don't we get on board with that? And if you want to continue to grow good vegetables, you have to start to understand the soil science, and guess what? We've solved your soil science problem with cows, it's like, believe it or not. So anyway, hopefully, can't we all just get along?
I know.
That was a good soapbox. I like it.
But you're right. I mean, we might disagree on where we're getting our protein from,
Right.
but the rest of the plate looks pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pretty produce heavy.
Yeah.
And, clean ingredients, right? I mean, we're all about removing the processed foods, and so there's a lot more similarities than there are differences. I mean, the differences are obviously where you're getting your protein from, animal meat or beans, but there are a lot of similarities.
So there's another thing I think is really interesting and actually encouraging to me, and that is that you are able to approach people at Whole Foods and get an ear, because like we think about Whole Foods, I think, or at least I have until you said that, as being just sort of like the organic monster. You know what I mean? It's the Amazon of, well, it is the Amazon.
Yeah, it is the
Amazon. But it's like it just seems like a faceless entity that is just charging you a lot of money for food, which you can get great food there, and they have all good options, and we shop there quite a bit. But it just seems like this sort of faceless thing. But the reality is, at least in your circumstance, that wasn't the case at all. And I think that that's incredibly encouraging, because if you don't have an idea of where to start with whatever you're doing,
you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I mean, I didn't have this figured out. Nobody gave me a play-by-play book that said, CPG 101. Here's what you got to do. I mean, it's sort of intuitive, but I really feel that, people buy from people they trust and they like. And I mean, I hope I was approachable enough to say, hey guys, you guys know my dad's restaurant. You've been eating there forever. I have something I created.
Yeah.
Here's what it is. Do you want to give it a try? And I have had people ask me like, I have a new bar or a new drink. Where do I start? I'm like, well, go right up to the bar category and introduce yourself to grocery buyer and just start there. You've got to start somewhere. So I think it also is having, what I call the trifecta of success is really having passion, persistence, and perseverance. Like, you may not get to the right person the first time, or you may not, just keep at it, keep going. I mean, and the companies, I think, that survive this journey are the ones that can make it through to the other end, because there will be obstacles, there will be hurdles, there will be walls. Just pivot, go around, and find another way. Right? I mean, there's, I have no choice, but I've got to, not just to make it work for myself and actually give a good example to my children, but I believe in it. Like, I think the world needs it. I want to put it out there. I mean, I want people to have an option. So, I'm going to do what it takes to get this brand out there.
That's awesome. So one thing I want to just touch on, and we kind of talked about it already, about General Mills or these bigger companies buying up the smaller companies. I always hear kind of a mixed bag of reactions when a company gets bought up. And I think the first knee-jerk reaction is, oh, forget it, that company's going to suck now. Epic Bar sold out to General Mills.
Sold out.
Yeah, like, oh, never mind, they're not a good company. I think there's that sort of knee-jerk reaction. But then I've heard a lot on the other side, which is that it's really a win for the bigger communities. And it actually means that, like, this message is catching on, and the importance of it is becoming more viral in a sense, if you will. And so I'm just curious your take on that. Like, when if you were to be approached at some point, do you consider that a win? Or are you trying to, avoid that at all possible? Yeah,
I would say I'm trying to avoid it. I mean, I haven't, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, sure.
Totally. But in my mind, the way I look at it, if I can stay intrinsic to the values of this brand, then I'm okay for it to express itself in any ways that the consumer wants. And if that means I need a little help from a big guy to get me out there, then I'm all for it. But it's got to just stay intrinsic to what's important to me. And to my brand.
So I think that's interesting because I think so when it's you and you're the face, and like we were talking before, we know you, we trust you, we're good, but then you become the face with General Mills. How do people then start to vet? Like that's what I think people get confused about. Like, you know, and I think Epic did a good job because they stayed on obviously in the company and they're helping running the day-to-day operations. And so like it gives you a sense they're still, like you said, intrinsically involved. But like, well, how do people decide, they're keeping, you know, that intention that they started with?
Well, I think it's happening with a lot of companies, even RX Bar, you know, sold. And if you read a post they put out there the week they sold, they're like, you'd never be able to tell what just happened behind because nothing is changing on the face of what we're presenting and what we're giving out to the world. So I think that's a very important message. And I think staying on board. Like, I mean, if you're in it for the money and you're just looking to cash out, then that's a whole different company you're building. If you're looking at it from, I'm doing this with a heartfelt message to build trust and to make it affordable and for everybody, then you've got to stay on board because, you know, you don't know what could happen. So I think that's important. I mean, I'm looking at it as a long journey.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think because that certainly is the fear. Like, and I have, you know, you can just look at the way that a corporate structure, or not, maybe not even corporate, like that name now, of course, has all these weird connotations around it. And like, oh, it's just a business entity. Like, you know, it doesn't have to be
I'm not a corporation. I'm just a business entity.
I'm a big corporation over here of one.
Massively incorporated by myself.
Exactly.
But the idea, you know, is that to kind of piggyback on what Vanessa was saying is like, oh, okay, so they bought this brand that has this recognition around, you've developed the trust of the buyer. And then because the labeling laws and all of this stuff are so loose or non-existent, now they can just systematically under purchase and still charge the same price. So they can, instead of paying a premium for the quality of meat that you do, they can just go out and buy junk meat, throw it in there, same spices, all the stuff, and then the labeling is such that you would never know, right? And so I think that's like fundamentally the fear that people have is that thing's going to be changed. And we've seen that with other products, right? So like the Atkins bars, like Atkins diet food, the difference between the Atkins diet and then the name that was trademarked and purchased, and people were like, oh yeah, these are Atkins bars, they're perfectly fine. And you're like, read the thing on there. You know what I mean? Like this has nothing to do with the two things, you know? So I mean, that's always the concern that I think people have. And I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense is that there's a difference. There's a big difference between being purchased and supported and fundamentally capitalized by a larger entity that can keep you moving forward on the mission that you're on, and like licensing your name and buying your own version of Necker Island and walking away. You know, and then you're like, God knows what's going on over there, you know? And so that should be something that people can suss out. You know?
And I think big food companies are taking notice of this conscious carnivore, right? Or conscious consumer in any category. I mean, they're taking notice that people are demanding higher quality and demanding transparency and demanding to know what's in their food. So I don't think this movement's going away. I think it's just growing. And they would do themselves a disservice to try and trick the trade. You know?
I agree. I think, the backfire from that would be profound. And I mean, you see like Jeff Bezos is meeting with Grassfed cattle ranchers, and you know, like Amazon is taking a huge interest in these. So it's like there is something definitely happening, and I think we have a really important opportunity right now to like drive that message and keep pushing it forward. And that's why we're happy to have you on and happy to like spread that message forth, because this is like, these are actually the moments, like these are actually the choices. Now when you go to the store, you do have the choice. You have that burger that you can buy, and all of a sudden Whole Foods can say, you know what's selling a lot are these burgers. And you know what, the whole industry is going to say, what's their ethos, what's their branding, what's their thing. And they will take notice. And so like, you can vote with your dollars.
And it's interesting. I mean, I'm curious to see, the jury's not out yet on what's going to happen with these biotech,
fake
burgers
meat
that
and
are,
Soylent and
I
stuff.
mean, I'm interested to see where those are going to be 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
in my experience, the burger's been around for decades, and I don't think it's
Right.
going anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I'm cleaning it up and elevating it a bit and giving
Right.
it some flavor profiles and sourcing from high quality
Yeah.
is a great thing, but I don't think the burger's going away.
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
interesting to see what's going to happen with these. I don't know. Have you guys
Sure.
tried the?
No.
No, I
the
haven't.
bleeding-
Not that I know of.
Yeah,
but
not on
bleeding
purpose.
burger.
But it's
Yeah.
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, and who knows? I mean, maybe there is. I always think like, okay, so part of this vegetarian story is you don't like the treatment of animals, and it's interesting because this is like a sidebar, but I've done a lot of hallucinogenics in my life, and that's been a part of like how I learn about things, and it's helped me to open certain conscious, ideals about things. And one of the things I've been interested in asking plant medicines and psychedelics is what's up with the animal story. Like, should I be avoiding meat? Should I be, is this unethical for me to be eating or like having another animal suffer for me? It's been a thing that I've grappled with within the psychedelic realm for years, always asking for answers and help and solutions to figure that out. And one of the things that's always come through to me is like that like in time, each animal species will evolve to a higher vibration. And there may be a time where we don't actually need to eat animals anymore. We might actually find a time where we don't need to have them as part of our food supply. And like, I think that's a wonderful thing. So I don't think we should blanket, like push things out that create no possibility for the future of what could happen. But like, we just have to stay with it and stay conscious about the choices we're making as we go there.
Right.
Yeah.
And evolutionarily speaking, we have,
Exactly.
ancestrally eaten animals.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
it's
just
part of
like
the life
all-
cycle.
Yeah, just like all the rest of the animals. And that's one of the things that is a little odd to me. And I do think that, I mean, any number of these meat substitute or meat alternatives, it gets a little bit weird to me, honestly. Like even the concept behind replacing it, because you're like, okay, so then what are we going to do with all these cows? So then cows are just going to go extinct then, or we're going to keep them in zoos, or like what to
That's
have
true.
a cow? You know what I mean? So if we
Yeah.
all of a sudden can produce beef
Right.
in a lab, then what the hell do we do with the cows? And so
Well, we would
and,
produce less of them.
Or eggs
but
with
then
no
what are they
chickens.
gonna,
Have you
what
seen
are they
that
gonna
one?
do?
Yeah. It's crazy.
So
Yeah.
it's like the ethical question. It seems like it answers one ethical question, but then it asks 50 million other ones. Because
Absolutely
now
agree
what?
with
Now who are we to decide what animals get to go extinct because we've replaced the parts of them that we deemed necessary with technology? And it's like who?
Right.
What the hell is that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we're still part of this whole thing. So it's a little bizarre. The
Yeah.
whole thing and.
Yeah,
and
it's
I just,
confusing. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
And we haven't, like, I still stick with humans have literally made nothing better ever when we intermingle. when we get in the mix and start screwing with stuff, we have not fixed or made better or improved any natural system that we've been involved in. So I don't think this is one that we're just going to like magic our way out of. We're like, what's going to fix this problem? This weird blend of like soy and genetics, and we're going to grow stuff, and don't worry, it'll be fine. You're like, I don't know. I'm
less
dubious.
skeptical.
And the health
Yeah.
benefits are so good for you.
Yeah, it's huge. Just like, look at this, amazing. It's got all the vitamin B. Like, well, what? Yeah, anyway.
I don't know. I'm less skeptical. I think I think that eventually there may be a place for it all, but
Yeah.
I can't see it. When I rationalize, I'm with you. I'm like, I can't
Right.
rationalize my way to it, but that doesn't mean that there's something out there that's yet to
Yeah.
be understood or discovered that we don't know.
Yeah, totally. Well, so this you're going to get involved.
Sorry,
in
you're getting like thrown into the middle.
You're going to get thrown into a really weird conversation. Okay, so there's a guy. Last weekend we were out at the Grand Canyon with our friends, and on our way home we were listening to this podcast. I don't know if you know Christopher Ryan. He's the author of Sex at Dawn. He has a book a podcast called Tangentially Speaking. But he's what is he? He's a psychologist.
A PhD, but I don't know
in psychology. But he
yeah.
has like an anthropology background. Anyway, he had this guy on whose name was Bruce Damer, I'm pretty sure, and he is a astrobiologist. It was a fascinating conversation that went from like the origins of life to where he thinks we're going. And this is actually where I think that this sort of petri dish meat may actually have a place. Is that his take is similar. He's kind of like a more well organized Elon Musk concept of we got to get off this planet. And his thought is that in 300 to 400 years, we're going to have to get off this planet. And he has different ideas about how to do it. And I think that is where all of a sudden these kind of things start to make a lot of sense, where
we start all over again.
We're starting
right?
fresh. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to go occupy a space station somewhere. We don't need the ark to bring cows 2 by 2 and all of this stuff. Let's just start producing this stuff that can make this, make the next iteration of our civilization one where this stuff doesn't exist. And here's how we do it.
See,
I'm
that's
so
what
glad I'm
saying.
not going to be around for that.
I know, it's pretty crazy.
But it's crazy because it could be your kids'
God.
kids.
Not
kids,
that far down the
it's
line.
not that far. Yeah. Well, who knows what it is, but it could be like
Interesting.
That's
Very interesting.
yeah. That's why I just think like we don't know. Like we don't even have all the information yet. All we have is the information we have now, and like this is the best we can do.
This is the best we
at
can
this
do.
particular
With
time.
So today.
So for today.
For today.
We're sticking with Tribali.
By good burgers.
2018.
Yes, let's date
For
this.
the record.
In case you find this, a million years from now.
Right,
listening to this podcast.
Right.
Come back to
Exactly.
the time.
The good news is tomorrow you can go buy this food. in your business.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
So where can people find it?
Okay, so we can. You guys can find it at Whole Foods in the SoPac region, which is Southern California, Arizona,
SoPac.
Nevada, and Hawaii. Hopefully, we'll get in. If Whole Foods is listening to
Whole
other
Foods
regions,
listen,
you gave me my first shot in, and I want more regions. And then Lassen's, Erewhon, and all the Bristol farms,
Oh, cool.
starting in about 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then we are rolling out to Super Targets, 200.
Oh, nice.
200
Wow.
Super Targets across
That's
the US.
amazing.
What's a super target?
With
the
super grocery
the-
stores.
They're
Gotcha.
just bigger. They're grocery. They've got more of a grocery.
So if it
department,
has food, like vegetables, it's a super target.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So can folks buy online or no?
Yes, you can
Okay.
also buy on our website.
Okay,
And you
perfect.
can also buy on Amazon.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, man.
So you can get it anywhere. Anyone
If
can get it anywhere.
you live in the Ozarks, you can get it. I mean, it can come straight to your door.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. You came all the way down here, and I'm so glad I'll just tell the listeners, we tried recording this, and the recording gods were not with us that day. And
Remotely.
we could
Yeah.
we couldn't get the internet connection strong enough to record you remotely, but we loved having you in person,
Thank you so
and
much.
it's always so much better, and we're so excited about your mission, and just let us know how we can stay involved and support you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Hey, folks, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please consider going to iTunes and leaving us a 5-star review and, write in a nice message there. Tell us what you think. Tell us what's going on for you out there. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Specifically, how awesome we are.
But we do love connecting, and it's nice to know there's folks out there listening, enjoying, and this is a great way to just stay in communication. So if you enjoy the podcast, you listen regularly, you're getting some benefit out of this, we would so love to see that 5-star review. And give us a shout out. We'd love to hear from you.
Just